Okay, welcome to tutorial number 6, I believe. This is using Automatic Duck to export an XML file into After Effects and have your sequence already set up for you automatically. Okay, so we can see here I've actually brought something in from Automatic Duck. I just wanted to show you what it looks like. And I've already done some corrections here. I masked out this area right here, duplicated this layer. But I'm going to show you how to get each one of these. Each one of these clips is actually cut in Final Cut, so they're a separate clip. So rather than having to edit them in After Effects, which is kind of a pain, I edited them in Final Cut, brought them in, and I will upload this entire After Effects file so that you guys can do the same thing. Okay, so and here I've pre-comped it and did some quick color correction and then set it to render. But let's go to Final Cut and take a look at how to do this. Okay, so here is Tokyo Storm, which I've renamed, but this is the actual MP4 file that Andrew Reed has uploaded to his Vimeo page. So you can see I've made cuts at every where every dissolve takes place. Let me turn the sound off so we don't have that one I'm scrubbing. And you can see that so each individual shot is cut up. And this is what you want to do. So if someone gives you, let's say, someone doesn't give you a Final Cut file, they give you one solid video and they want you to grade it. What you can do is you can just come into Final Cut and do what I've done here, which is cut it up very quickly using the razor blade tool, and then export it. So with the sequence selected, let me turn the audio back on so that it gets exported as well. You're going to, you'll see that it's selected here and here. Go to File, Export, XML. Leave all these checked away. They include master clips for outside selection, save project with latest clip metadata, version 5. This is all default. I'm going to click OK. It's going to ask me where. I've already saved it as Tokyo Storm XML, so I'm going to save it as Tokyo Storm Demo XML. I'm going to save it. And then I'm going to go into After Effects. And I'm going to close this so you can have a fresh project. So close project. Let's save all the changes that I made. Okay, brand new project. Remember, always, always be sure to be in 32-bit for best results. I'm going to right click here in the project window. I'm going to click Import, Automatic Duck Pro Import AE, Color Gear, EOS HD, Tokyo Storm Demo XML. I'm going to click that and click Open, and boom, it's done. It created a composition for me called Tokyo Storm that I can double click to open, and here it is, all of the clips cut up, ready to be color graded, good to go. Okay, so a real quick tip. I know that this is really blown out, so I'm going to change the color of it by going here. I'm going to choose like a peach so it stands out from the rest. There's a couple other clips that are a little blown out that I want to kind of bring under control. This one, I know this one's a little bright, so I'm going to change it to peach as well. And I believe the one at the this one definitely. And the one after it, because I want to do something to where right now you can see these guys working in the steam and smoke inside the little restaurant there. And when I do color correction on them, I want to make sure that I can get in there to do some adjustments to make sure that I don't lose them like I did in the other color correction, the original one that I did that most of you have seen that's up on Vimeo. Okay, so now I want to select everything on this timeline by clicking the top one and holding down Shift and clicking the bottom one, and then control clicking or command clicking, command on a Mac, control on a PC, the peach layers to keep them separate because I want to color correct them separately from everything else. And so all the ones that are selected, I'm going to pre-compose them or pre-comp them. And the way I do that is I hold down Command Shift C, or it'd be Control Shift C for you on the PC. and this little dialog will pop up, pre-comp 1. I will call this Blade Runner Standard. It says move all attributes into new composition. You have two options, leave all attributes or move all attributes. Moving all of them will take any attributes that these actually have that may have come in from Final Cut and move them into the pre-composition, or I guess I'm trying to think of the other term that's used for pre-comp. Nest. Well, it will nest all of those attributes into that layer itself. Or if you've done anything to them here in After Effects and you want to be able to control them here within this composition rather than the composition they're going to be moved into, you would check leave all. But I want to move all because I'm not going to really play with them here. And then I'm not going to, you can open new composition, I'm not going to because I just want to get it out of the way. So this will simplify my entire timeline, and you'll see that this layer, this layer, this layer, and this layer will remain while everything else will be nested into a new composition. Boom. Okay, so there they are. There's everything else is now in this composition, so if I were to turn it off, you would see that there's nothing there, and then you would see this layer would pop up, and then this one, and this one, and that one. And these are the only ones that I want to color correct. I don't want to grade them yet, I just want to correct them. I just want to do a tech pass or a technical grade. So let's get to it. Let's jump over to this one here. You can see that in this one there is a little bit of detail. Most of the detail is lost on this sign, and this sign obviously because it's either flaring the lens or it's just so bright that you can see it's actually bringing up the shadows everywhere else. And of course I want to bring these shadows back down to the levels that the other shots are in, and I want to see if I can bring this under control. Now I could do that I could do that with levels and curves and a couple of other methods, but the easiest way, and most of you will have access to Color Finesse, is to just go down to Synthetic Aperture, select Color Finesse, and then go into the full interface. That will open up Color Finesse. Now you don't need to do it this way, but it's handy to know how to use Color Finesse because it is extremely powerful and will help you to get where you want to go a little quicker. Now look at this. Okay, so here's our waveform, and you can see up here at 100 IRE that it's completely blown out, but I got plenty of room with my shadows. My shadows aren't even approaching 0, so they're not even close to being crushed. And of course our 7 to 10 range, which is where broadcast video wants to bottom out at, we're way above that. So if we were to go into selecting our Luma range, and you'll see that very little shadow information, a lot of midtones, a lot of highlights. Let's go down to Luma range and let's check it to select it, and then let's adjust it. So let's see if we can't get some more shadow information there, and then I want to isolate our highlights so where only that area, the areas that are really blown out, are considered highlights, and everything else is considered midtones. And he said it didn't really change anything here. Oh, and might as well cover how to read this. The way a spectrograph works, or waveform monitor, depending on how you want to, what do you want to call it, is that it moves across your image from left to right, which is really hard to kind of understand at first. But essentially, it's giving you a vertical reading in waveform protocol of your image in slices. Like, in other words, there's a if you were to think of it in terms of pixel slices, if it were a pixel wide slice that went all the way from the top to the bottom of the image, from here to here, and what it's saying is that at this pixel wide, or 10 pixels wide, whatever it is, whatever the sample rate is, that you have this much shadow information, this much highlight information, or midtone, and this much highlight information in this particular vertical strip. And then that is displayed over here, and you can see that there's a lot of information in the mids, a lot of spread out information on the highlights, and then a lot of shadow information, and then everything in between. So you can see that And this is actually pretty good. I always want to get my shadows, if I want to do any sort of detail work in the shadows, I always want to get my shadows up around 30, 30 to 33, which is hard to do without smoking up the room. And then I want to keep my highlights around 80 to 90 and not get into the 100 range. And when it gets to 100, you can't come back from that. It's pretty much blown out. That's past your broadcast standards, and is really just almost unrecoverable at that point. Then you can see we've got some unrecoverable highlights at this part of the image, which would be right here, and this part of the image, which would be right here. Obviously, we're working left to right, and this part right here, which would be, in these highlights right here. So let's go into just do RGB for now to keep things simple, because most of us are familiar with that. And the pedestal refers to a part of this graph here, your curve graph. Your knee would be up in here, and your pedestal is down here. So when you drop the pedestal, the line here will curve down, kind of like so, over like that. And I want to go back to result so I can see what happens when I go into my midtones, and I'm just going to drop the pedestal. So you can see the curve, see this move, see all this move and stretch out, and you can see I'm starting to get a little detail back. And this is just the midtones. So I'm going to bring the midtones down. Come on. With me. My shadows are coming down to the bottom of the broadcast range. That's pretty good versus our source. And that, you can see I'm starting to get the detail back on the highlights. Okay, so now I want to go to the highlights. I want to bring them down. Actually, I'm just going to stick with the pedestal because that's the easiest. That's what's going to draw it down. You see my highlights are coming down. See if we can't get them down to the 90 range. Gives us a little more latitude. You can see that dropped my peak level down here to 0.9 or 90. And then here in the shadows, I'm actually going to lift them. I want them up around this area. So I'll still have a nice flat image, but I still have a lot more detail coming back in those highlight areas that were blown out. And then we're done. And there you can see that change. Now this is easier to correct than the other stuff. So the other thing I'm going to do here is I want to look at the adjacent image to see the levels. Okay, that's got some pretty deep, rich blacks, and so does that in the shadows. So I'm going to bring my shadows down. I'm just going to do a simple levels adjustment. Color correction, levels, and you can see our shadows are way up here. So let's bring the input black down to about there, and that should match the adjacent frames a little better. Yeah. If we were to look at something similar, like say this light and this sign, let's sample that white. That looks like 83, 82, 75. I'm looking at these values over here. This sign, 0.8, 0.8, 0.7. Okay, let's go back to something with similar type exposure, which would be around here, or this is a little lower. These are 0.3, 0.2. Here we go. There we go, 0.7, 0.5. So let's bring it down a little bit darker. In fact, let's do that with the gamma. So we bring the mids down a little bit and bring the shadows down about to there, and now we have a pretty balanced image. I think now if we sample this is what did I say, right here, yeah, 7, 5, and 4, and yeah, 7. Yeah, this range is kind of blown out. It's got a real highlight on it. So let's check the highlights on the other one. Okay, like right in here. Yeah, okay, so they're 9, 8. Yeah, so we're pretty much the same. And then if I eyeball it, it looks like it could exist in the same sort of exposure range as the other. So we're done with that one. So our mid-range, let's take a look at our mid-range. Well, since we don't have a scope here, we can't really tell, but so we're just kind of guessing that this is our mid-range, and the values are 0.3, 0.4, and 0.2. Let's find something similar. And these are a little brighter, 0.6, 0.5, 0.4, about 2, 2 points higher. So let's go ahead and add a levels adjustment. It should be easier now because levels was the last thing we selected. Click levels. You can see shadows, we can adjust them a little bit, and then the midtones, adjust the gamma and bring that down to where we're down in that, yeah, a little bit lower. Okay, so now that should match. Yeah, it's not too jarring or startling. Let's move to this one first. Now this one is pretty decent. I don't think there's much we need to do, except I want to isolate this. So I'm going to duplicate this layer by hitting Command D. I'm going to draw a mask. Since this shot is static, I don't need to really worry about it that much. I'm going to draw a mask here. And I'm going to feather it by hitting F to bring up the mask feather. I feather that out by about 70-80 pixels. And if we were to isolate that, you'd see that's what I'm isolating. Just a quick power window so that I can control that exposure separately when I begin to do the technical pass. We're going to do the same thing here. I'm going to hit Command D or Control D on a PC, duplicate this layer and bring it up, and then I'm going to draw I'm actually going to zoom out. If you have a scroll wheel on your mouse, I don't on this one, you can scroll down and it'll zoom out. You can scroll up and it'll zoom in on this area if you put the mouse over it. But I'm going to use Command minus or Control minus on a PC to zoom out so I can see the whole frame. And then I'm going to hit the pen tool and I'm going to draw, I'm going to take this line right here and click here to start. I'm going to come all the way down to about here and then across here and then down to about here, and then we'll close that off by clicking there and there. And now if I isolate that, you'll see I just have that chunk of the image. So I'm going to feather that out as well by hitting F while it's still selected and feathering that out so I get a nice smooth area there. So now if we were to isolate it by hitting solo, you can see there's a nice fall off. In fact, let's add to that fall off. Let's have it fall off a little more so we get a nice blend. And when you're doing power windows or you're isolating exposures, you always want to make sure you have a nice blend between whatever you're working on and the rest of your footage. Otherwise you'll get a nice hard line on your footage where you've done a correction. So now I want to, in this, I just want to make sure that when, I'm going to add a levels adjustment and you'll see why. I just want to make sure that when I start adding things over the top of this, that I'm able to control this to keep it keep the exposure kind of even with everything else. But I'm not going to change it now because I don't know what's going to happen when I add the other layers. But with this one, I want to bring all of this brightness kind of in line with all of this here. So again, just a levels adjustment, or what I could do. Let's use actual color gear for this. Go adjustments, exposure. Let's drop a 2-stop on there. Boom. And bring it up a little bit. Blacks are a little rich. I just want to drop it down. Okay, let's A/B it. There. Nice and even. And this is ready to completely grade. So I'm going to select all by hitting Command A. Click the collapse twirly there. And now I'm ready to do a style pass. These are all pretty even now. So, the simplest style pass that I can do, let's hit Option Command Y, create a couple times to create some adjustment layers. And to do we've already seen how to do the one that's already up on Vimeo. But I know I'm going to put a Tone Monster greener on here because, as you know by now, that's my favorite little tone monster. Maybe a vignette, just something simple. And then let's leave these two out of it. So let's just do a tone monster and a vignette. I don't really see a need for any sort of green correction or gamma, although we could, I guess we could hit Option Command Y, and let's do a Cinegamma. Drop it down here, and oh yes, we're definitely going to want Option Command Y. We're also going to want hit Enter, and a spectral enhancer. And that, of course, will go right above our Cinegamma layer. And we will turn it off. And let's add that now. Let's go to Punches, Spectral Enhancer. That's added. As you know by now, I like turning these yellow, so I know which ones they are. I like turning the Cinegammas and the adjustments to dark green. The greener layer, doesn't matter, let's just call it green. And the vignette's going to be a kind of an orangish vignette, so let's label it orange. That should be easy to keep straight. Okay, so we haven't done a greener yet, but let's do a Cinegamma and go to our Fixits. And let's just take a look at these so I can explain these a little bit to you. Each one of these has a different function. You're just going to have to play with them. And as you watch more tutorials, you'll see which ones I choose. This isn't, when I say low contrast, for some reason, I just have a very good naming convention for these, but the low contrast flat is kind of a flat curve. It doesn't do a whole lot to your footage, so when you add it, you don't get a drastic film look out of it. You just get a mild film look. But this low contrast one is actually for low contrast footage, so it adds more contrast. So it's not a very good, but as long as you know that, and of course you'll figure that out as you experiment with these, you'll find out which ones work better for which types of footage. But since I know low contrast flat's not going to give me a hell of a lot of here, let's go to this one so you can see the results. Not going to give me a whole lot of gamma curve to it. I'm going to add this. Should be a mild adjustment. It is. It's a little darker, but it's a little more filmic just alone by the way it is. I'm going to go into, in fact, I'm going to reduce that a little bit, which is something I don't normally do. But let's go ahead and hit T for opacity, and let's mix that down a little bit. It's like 80%. Okay, and let's go into our gears, to Tone Monsters, TM three-way greener. Add that. Get some nice looking. Yeah, I like that. Our vignette, special vignettes. As you guys know by now, I just kind of like this one. It goes well with the kind of stuff I like to do. Okay, and then of course we're going to create a mask for that, so we're going to go to elliptical mask. And with the layer selected, if you double click the elliptical or whatever mask you have, it will automatically add that mask to your layer in the aspect ratio that you have. Actually, let me back up. I'm going to undo that. And I'm going to show you something that will save you headaches down the road. If you are ever going to be using an adjustment layer that may move, or that you may want to tweak the shape of in a way that you want to make sure that you are covered from edge to edge, it's always a good rule of thumb to take your adjustment layers that have those sorts of effects on them and hit S for scale and scale them up. So now you can see that the edges of this adjustment layer, if I do an effect that goes all the way to the edge, you're not going to see it bleed through on the edge of the frame. It'll actually cover everything up. So now I'm going to do double click, and you can see this mask goes way out here. And then I'm going to resize it by double clicking it and grabbing this corner and holding shift so that it scales uniformly, and bring that down to about this size, and then drag it over here. And then I'm going to click invert on the mask. There we go. There's a nice little vignette. And you can see that's really hard. And this is why you want to feather. So I'm going to hit MM twice. Sometimes you have to hit it 4 times, because when you hit MM, sometimes it hides the mask. So hit MM again to reveal all of your mask properties. And I'm going to feather this mask out. You can see it's starting to eat away at the edges. But I don't want to lose that much of my vignette. So you can use this mask expansion, which is an expansion or contraction tool. What that allows, if you increase this number, your mask boundary will actually start to move out away from center. If you reduce it, it begins to bring it back in. So this allows you to do what you can do like in Colorista, where they have all those adjustments, which is just a fancy way of doing what we're doing here, of creating a more gentle, like here if I reduce this, you can see the blur starts to come in, but it's still the same feather on the way out. And I can do that. And what I can also do is, if let's say you want a heavier something on the edges, you can duplicate this layer and make it darker. You can widen it out so you have more blur on the edges than you have here. But I like the way this looks. Actually, it's a little heavy. Let me go ahead and bring that expansion back out. I don't want to bring the blur in that far. There, that's nice. Okay. But we know this is going to work on all of our standard footage, our standard stuff that we pre-comped. Looks great. And let's see how well it treated our adjusted footage. Now look at that. See that? Beautiful. Now let me turn off the adjustments on this layer, and you can see how much brighter this is. See, that doesn't seem to match everything else that we have in our sequence. There, that's really nice. Now you may not like green, you might want to go with a different color. Let's go over to our other adjusted footage. This is the one in which we cropped off this and brought the exposure down. Maybe we brought it down a little too much. I'm looking here, and I'll bet you this isn't reading pure white. So with the input white, you can see I boosted the input white, which it's kind of backwards. If you boost input white, it actually lowers your white levels. If you lower it, it actually boosts it, because you're telling it, I want to read white at this point in the histogram. In other words, I want it to, if you lower it from 1, it begins to come down to like 0.9 and 0.8. You're saying that I want that to be pure white, blown out pure white. But if you raise it, you're basically saying I want blown out pure white to be actually above the blown out level, or the 100 IRE level. So by doing that, you actually reduced the brightness of your image. But I went a little too far with that, so I'm going to bring it back down to 0.09. And my output white I dropped. I want the output white to be a little closer to pure white. Let's go 98. There we go. Nice and balanced. And then this one shouldn't be too blown out in that area that we talked about. But let's say I want to bring a little bit of that detail back. I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm actually going to take input white and bring it up a little bit. 0.08. And that brought back just enough detail to where I can actually make out a human figure in that area instead of just a white-ish yellow blob. Oh, and then our spectral enhancer, which we don't even have on yet. Now, as you probably know by now, a spectral enhancer is really powerful, so let's mix it down about where it usually needs to be, which is around 50 to 45%. And I want you to watch these guys right here, all this color in here. Watch what happens when I turn on the spectral enhancer. I'm going to turn it on, and bang, look at that. Now you can see how green that crate is. All the color in here just completely popped. All this blue is nice and rich, and it's going to be that way for the whole sequence. But we're done. We are done. We have nice rich color across the board. It's nice and vibrant. It's a little green, but that's what we did. And, we can go with a different thing. You can actually go in and tweak your settings any way you want. Let's say, hey, I forgot this one. Maybe I wanted to do something different. This looks really great, though, by the way. Let's say I wanted to do something different here. I could actually go into this layer here by double-clicking and select this layer and add a levels adjustment if I wanted to. Let's say I wanted to make this a little brighter, and I wanted to maybe skew the color a little bit, maybe add a little bit more blue to it, and reduce the red slightly so I get a little bit more of a cyan kind of color, like that. And then we would go back here, and that would change the way this looks. See how it's got more of a cyan tint to it. So let's do this. Let's do a snapshot, and then go back here, turn this levels adjustment off, go back in, and then we can compare this with our snapshot and see that, yeah, that's a little bit brighter, it's a little bit more cyan, it's a little crisp, it's got a nice punch to it. So maybe we want to leave that in this particular version of our grade, which I'm actually going to do. I really like it, so I'm going to keep it. So then you just render it out. And then to do that, you hit Command-Shift/, and that will bring up the render queue, and you'll see here that it'll default to 444. But I've given you some settings here. So I've given you, in fact, let's go ahead and go back and, so you've got 444, which is the default. But let's say you're on a PC. I've given you this preset, the DNX HD linear off, and you can render it out, and I'll show you. I've already rendered it out for you. Had to take a break. So it's right here. And you can see that the DNX HD is pretty close to what we have in After Effects. The differences that you'll see if we go back and forth, if I bring this down, is looking. You probably can't see it on your screen, but right here on the umbrella, on the DNX HD, I get all of this detail here, and on its jacket where this light is wrapping around, and then of course in this area where the light is wrapping around these shadows as well. Whereas in here, I don't really see that detail here in After Effects very well, and the same in here. There's a little bit more luminance information in the DNX HD version, but it will get you there pretty closely. And let's say you take a look at it and you're like, wow, that's a little bit brighter than I wanted. You can go to export and export movie to QuickTime Movie or whichever version you're going out to. Go into options, and then you can go to filter, and it'll give you a little preview there, and you can go to adjustments, and you can make a little brightness adjustment. You can just maybe drop the brightness down a little bit, but for the most part it's going to be pretty spot on. And I'm going to click cancel. That covers DNX HD. You can see it's a pretty good codec. It's not quite up to par with ProRes, but it's pretty close, and they can always improve it and get it pretty much dead on. The one thing I didn't cover, I don't know if I want to do it here, if I want to do it somewhere else, is that if you notice really closely, there's some dissolves here in this footage. You can see I've cropped it, and then there's a dissolve from here to there. And if we go into the color corrected version, one thing you should take note of, you'll see that 0705 is the exact time code that I have here, and if I change it, if I move to here, because this pre-comp or nested composition is nested within this composition. Whenever I move the playhead, it changes in both compositions. So that way you can sort of A/B where you were before and after kind of thing. So you can see what this will look like. See, that's really green, and maybe you don't want it quite like that. So what you can do is you can actually keyframe your dissolve from one setting to another. So let's say I want it, really dark for this shot, or maybe that's too dark. Maybe I don't want to be that sort of crushed, but I do in the next shot. What I can do is I can go in and find that area that I cut. I just hit the I button, select a layer, and hit I to go to its endpoint. And I know that's where the dissolve starts, and then I can go in here and let's see what is causing my, I believe it's my Cinegamma that's correcting the gamma quite a lot. I can hit Command Shift D or Control Shift D on a PC, which will watch this layer. It'll split right there. Now I have two versions, and I'm going to hit the caps lock so that doesn't update, so I can work faster. I'm going to go in here and drag this out. Go back in here, find where that dissolve ends. Right there it looks like. You can see it snap off. Oops. There. So I want my to move incrementally in steps in After Effects. You want to use the page up and page down to go page up to go step back, page down to go step forward, and then you can hold down Shift to go 10 frames at a time. So it'd be if it was Shift page up, you would go skip 10 frames back. Shift page down, you'd skip 10 frames forward. And if you're on a laptop, you want to hold down the function key and then use your arrow up, down, left, and right keys. Your up downs are page up and page down. Your left and right are home and end. When you hold down the function key, and home will take you to the beginning of a composition, end will obviously take you to the end. But I want to go back 1 frame, 2 frames. Okay, I want to see that my dissolve ends right there, and then I can come back, hit caps lock, come back over here, and I know that that's how long I want this to last. And then I'm going to hit T for opacity. You can see that comes up. I'm going to set a keyframe by clicking the stopwatch. Hit this one. Hit I to go to the input. I'm going to click this little diamond here to set another keyframe, and I want this to fade. Actually, I want to back this off so that this is down to about 56%. And I want to I'll hit T for this one, and I want to set the opacity here from 55. Was it 81 before, correct? Yes. Then hit K to go to the next keyframe and bring this up to 81. Okay, set that one to 81, and then I'm going to drop this one to 0. And then I'm going to step back. I can either hit J for the shortcut key to go back here and drop this one to 0 as well. And then you're done. So I will have, hopefully without eating up too much of my memory, get a nice exposure there, which dissolves to a nice exposure over here. And that about covers it. Now I could go into each individual dissolve and do that, but you get the general idea. And that covers it. That's the basic way to deal with sequences with your tech grade and your final pass. Getting everything in there with automatic duck, and you are good to go. So I will see you next time. Until then, happy grading. And next time looks like we're finally going to get into masks and tracking, and then grain or noise reduction, which I'm sure a lot of you are excited to see. I apologize that Camtasia has been buggy and not letting me get that one out to you. So it will be out as soon as possible. Hope you guys had great holidays, and I will see you next time.